That old woman won't live much longer. Once she's in the nursing home, this ranch will be ours. That was the first sentence that ripped through my ears when I checked the camera last week. My stomach dropped. My own son, Ethan, sat in the living room with his wife, Tanya, their voices casual, their hands digging through my locked files as if they were sorting through old magazines. Tanya held up one folder and smirked in the glow of the lamp. I froze in my chair as the footage streamed across my phone. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. This story is raw, and it begins with betrayal so shocking I almost doubted my own mind. My name is Marjorie Harris. I am 72 years old. I have lived long enough to see both the best and worst of people. But nothing could have prepared me for the day my only son and his wife revealed who they really were. The footage was crystal clear. Ethan rifled through my desk folders, tossing papers onto the coffee table. Tanya tapped one document with her finger and said, "Look at this appraisal. $880,000. Imagine what we could do with that kind of money." She laughed, sharp and cruel. Ethan leaned back in my armchair like it was already his. "All it takes is a signature. She barely reads anymore. We'll tell her it's insurance. She'll sign whatever we put in front of her." I had hired a technician the week before to repair the surveillance system. I forgot to mention it to them. That forgetfulness saved me. Watching the scene unfold, I wanted to scream, but no sound left my throat. I felt betrayed, gutted, furious, and paralyzed all at once. For decades, I had built that ranch with my late husband. Early mornings, bitter winters, and endless work had kept it alive. It was supposed to be my family's legacy, yet here was my son, plotting to strip it away before I was even gone. I clutched the phone so tightly my hands shook. Tanya's voice cut again through the speakers. "Once we get her into a smaller place, she won't fight us. She'll accept it. Old people always do. That's when we cash out." Old people. That was me. To them, I wasn't a mother. I was a problem standing between them and their big payout. I pressed pause on the video and sat in silence. The house around me felt different, as if the walls had shifted overnight. My living room had been their stage, my documents their props, and my son the lead actor in a betrayal I could barely comprehend. I wanted to believe I had misheard, that stress had twisted their words, but when I played the recording again, every syllable cut deeper. Ethan muttered, "She's paranoid anyway. Everyone knows she forgets things. Who will believe her if she complains?" Tanya snorted. "Exactly. We'll tell people she's losing it. Gaslighting her will be easy." Gaslighting. That word echoed like a hammer in my chest. My own son planned to use my age and the occasional slips of memory against me. He wanted to twist my reality until I doubted myself. It was not just theft. It was war on my dignity. I leaned back and closed my eyes, breathing hard. Memories of Ethan as a child rushed in. His scraped knees, his laughter in the hayfield, the nights I stayed awake while he fought fevers. I had given up everything after his father died to keep him safe, fed, and educated. And now, in the span of a few sentences caught on camera, that boy was gone. The betrayal was sharp, but underneath it, a colder truth settled in. They believed I was weak. They believed I was too old, too forgetful, too afraid to resist. That assumption, more than the plot itself, sparked something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Still, fear clawed at me. What if they were right? What if I confronted them and no one believed me? What if my mind really was slipping? For a brief, terrifying moment, I wondered if I was losing my grip on reality. But the footage was real. The voices were real. Their words were real. That was my proof. I sat there for hours, watching, rewinding, playing the same lines over and over. Each time my resolve grew. I was not imagining it. I was not paranoid. I was a mother who had stumbled onto the ugliest truth about her own son. When dawn broke the next morning, light spilled over the fields outside my window. The ranch stood strong, as it always had, but inside my walls, the foundation of my family had cracked beyond repair. That day, I promised myself one thing. If they wanted a war for this ranch and for my mind, I would fight back. And I would not go down quietly. The morning after I saw the footage, the air in the house felt heavier. Every sound echoed differently. Every movement seemed sharper. I moved slowly through the kitchen, making coffee like always, but my hands trembled as I poured. Ethan walked in, yawning, scratching the back of his neck like nothing had changed. He smiled faintly and said, "Morning, Mum. Did you sleep well?" I studied his face, trying to find some trace of the boy I once knew. Instead, I saw a man who had already rehearsed his lines. I forced a smile and nodded. I slept fine. Tanya came in moments later, her perfume arriving before she did. She wrapped her robe tight and said, "We were talking last night. Maybe it's time we help you organize your paperwork. It's a lot for someone your age." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp. I stirred my coffee and kept quiet. They had no idea I had seen everything. They thought they were in control, and for now, I let them think so. I wanted to hear more. After breakfast, Ethan left to run errands, or so he said. Tanya stayed behind, sitting at the table with her laptop. She tapped away on the keys, glancing at me now and then. "You know, Marjorie," she began, "Ethan and I worry about you. You forget things sometimes. It's natural at your age, but it could cause problems. We don't want you to get taken advantage of." I raised my eyes from the newspaper. Taken advantage of by who? She shrugged. "Anyone. Scammers. Even neighbors. That's why it's safer if we handle the big things for you. Bills, insurance, land taxes. Those are complicated. You can trust us." Her words were polite, but underneath them was the same message I had heard on the camera. "You are too old. You are slipping. You need us." I folded the paper and stood up. "I have been paying those bills for decades. I'm still capable." Tanya's lips twitched, almost a smile. Of course, of course. But why stress yourself? It's easier if we step in." The conversation ended there, but the tension stayed. She was planting seeds, and I knew it. She wanted me to question my own ability. Later that afternoon, I sat by the window, looking out over the pasture. The cows moved slowly, their shapes familiar against the wide field. That land had been my life's work. Every fence post, every barn board had a piece of me in it. The thought of losing it to my own son cut deeper than any wound. When Ethan came home, his voice was louder than usual, cheerful in a way that felt forced. He dropped a grocery bag on the counter and said, "Mum, I got your favorite bread. Thought you'd like it." I thanked him, but inside I wondered what the bread was meant to cover. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "We need to talk about the future," he said. I kept my face calm. "What future?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Your future. You're 72. You shouldn't be stressing about running this ranch forever. Tanya and I want to help you transition. Maybe move you into something smaller, more manageable. You'd be safer, less work for you. Doesn't that sound good?" I sipped my coffee before answering. "And what about the ranch?" He didn't hesitate. We'll handle it. Maybe lease it out. Maybe sell if the price is right. The appraisal came back high. It's worth a lot, Mum. You'd be comfortable for the rest of your life. I set the cup down carefully. I am comfortable now. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. You don't see how much easier life could be if you let us take control. We're thinking about our future too. Kids, stability, a real business. You can't run this ranch forever. Why not let it benefit us all? For a moment, silence filled the room. I looked at my son, the man who had once begged me to let him stay out late as a teenager, the man whose scraped knees I had bandaged, and I saw greed burning in his eyes. I will not discuss selling this land, I said firmly. He leaned back, sighing as if I were the unreasonable one. We'll talk again later. Don't shut it down so fast. That night, I replayed the footage on my phone. I listened to Tanya's cold laughter and Ethan's voice calling me paranoid. Their plan was moving forward, and they were testing me, pushing me, waiting for me to stumble. The following days were a blur of small, calculated comments. Tanya would sigh loudly when I misplaced my glasses. Ethan would shake his head when I repeated a question. See, Mum, this is why we worry, he would say, pretending to be gentle. Every little slip of memory was turned into proof against me. I began to doubt myself. Once I forgot to turn off the stove, something I had never done before. Tanya caught it and said, "What if you burned the whole house down? This is serious, Marjorie. You can't keep living like this." Her words stung. Was I really losing it? Or was I just tired? Their gaslighting worked in small ways, wearing me down day by day. One evening, while setting the table, Ethan pulled out a folder. He laid it in front of me. Here are some papers we need you to sign. Nothing major, just updating your will and insurance. Standard stuff. We talked to a lawyer friend, and he said it's better to get this done now. I opened the folder slowly. The pages were covered in legal terms, small print that blurred under the kitchen light. My eyes caught a few words. Transfer, irrevocable, deed. I looked up at him. What exactly am I signing? He smiled, too quickly. It's boring legal jargon. Just signatures to make sure everything's clear. Trust me, it's fine. Tanya stepped closer, pointing to the lines. Here, here, and here. Just sign. It will protect you. I set the pen down. I'll read it first. Tanya frowned. It's 20 pages, Marjorie. You'll get confused. Why drag it out? Sign it, and we'll take care of the rest. I pushed the folder back. I said I'll read it first. Ethan's eyes darkened, but he forced a smile. Fine. Read it. But don't take too long. We don't want to miss the window on some of these legal changes. They left the room, whispering to each other. I stayed at the table, staring at the folder. I felt the trap closing in. Alone, I opened my phone and replayed the recording again, reminding myself I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. I had proof, but proof meant nothing if I couldn't find the strength to use it. The folder stayed on my kitchen table for 2 days. Every time I walked past it, the bold letters on the cover seemed to whisper at me. Transfer. Deed. Irrevocable. Each word was a warning. Still, I kept it there. I wanted Ethan and Tanya to believe I was hesitating, maybe even breaking under the weight of their pressure. On the third morning, Tanya walked in while I was making coffee. She glanced at the folder and smirked. Still not signed. Marjorie, this isn't complicated. It's for your own good. I set the mug down and met her eyes. If it's for my good, why are you rushing me? Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because we know you, and you tend to overthink. You forget details. Better to get this settled before mistakes happen. I didn't answer. She sighed, snatched up the folder, and tapped her manicured nails on it. We'll sit down tonight. Ethan and I will walk you through it, step by step. No excuses. That evening, the kitchen turned into their stage again. Ethan spread the pages across the table like a dealer laying out cards. He held the pen out to me. It's simple. Sign here, and everything will be secured. You won't have to worry. I crossed my arms. I told you. I need to read it. His voice hardened. Mum, stop being stubborn. You don't even know what half these words mean. That's why we're here. To protect you. Tanya leaned in, her tone sharp. Do you want to make it harder on yourself? Because that's what you're doing. You're dragging this out, and it's unnecessary. My hands trembled under the table, but I forced my voice steady. If you want me to sign, you'll give me time. Ethan's jaw tightened. He slammed his hand on the table, making the pages jump. You think you know better than us? You think you can keep running this place? You can barely keep track of your own glasses. The words hit harder than his hand. I swallowed, my throat dry. Tanya added her venom. She's losing it, Ethan. Just like we said. She's paranoid and confused. Maybe we should take her to Dr. Foster and get her evaluated. Then she won't have to worry about signing anything at all. They looked at each other, and the silence after their words was worse than the shouting. They had already planned this. It wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about breaking me. I stood up slowly, holding onto the chair to steady my legs. I don't need a doctor. I'm fine. Ethan's laugh was cold. That's exactly what someone slipping would say. Denial. Classic symptom. For a moment I felt dizzy. Their words wrapped around me like smoke. Was I slipping? I had forgotten the stove last week. I had misplaced my keys twice in one day. Was I becoming the person they described? I gripped the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. No, this was their trick. I had proof. I had the recording. I wasn't imagining any of it. But they didn't know that. To them, I was just an old woman crumbling under pressure. And that was dangerous. The next morning, I tried to go about my chores. I fed the chickens, checked the fence line, and walked the perimeter of the field. The work grounded me. Every fence post reminded me I wasn't useless. I was still capable. The ranch was alive, and so was I. But when I came back inside, Tanya was waiting. She leaned against the counter, holding a cup of coffee. You left the gate open, she said casually. I frowned. No, I didn't. Her eyes narrowed. Yes, you did. Ethan had to close it. If the cows had wandered off, it would have been a disaster. You need to admit when you make mistakes. My stomach churned. I knew I had locked that gate. But her certainty made me question myself. I walked past her without answering, but inside, doubt gnawed at me. That night, I lay awake replaying every step I had taken at the gate. The latch, the sound it made, the way I tugged it to check. I knew I had done it right. Yet Tanya's voice echoed, You left it open. Was she lying? Or was my mind betraying me? The following day, Ethan cornered me in the barn. Mum, this can't go on. You're making mistakes. You're forgetting things. Tanya and I are worried sick. We've already talked to a lawyer. If you don't sign, we'll have to take another route. I looked him dead in the eye. What other route? He hesitated, then said flatly, We'll get guardianship, legal control. You won't be able to fight it. It's better if you cooperate now. My heart pounded. Guardianship. That word cut like a blade. They wanted to strip away my independence completely, reduce me to a child in the eyes of the law. I stepped back, clutching the rake in my hands. You're my son. How can you say that to me? His face was hard. Because it's for the best. You don't see what we see. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked past him, holding myself together until I reached the house. Behind the closed door of my bedroom, I let the tears fall. But even as I cried, a new thought formed. If they were going to use guardianship, they would need evidence. They would need to prove I was incompetent. That meant they would keep pushing me, keep trying to create mistakes, keep trying to convince me I was losing my mind. They wanted me to doubt myself until I collapsed. I wiped my face and looked out the window at the fading light. The ranch stretched wide, strong, steady, just as it always had. If I was going to survive this, I needed to be just as steady. The proof on my phone was not enough. I needed more. I needed to let them think they were winning, even as I built my case against them. For now, I would let them whisper, let them lie, let them circle like vultures. But I would not give in. This was no longer just about land. It was about my sanity, my dignity, and my name. And I wasn't ready to surrender any of it. Ethan's threat about guardianship lingered in my mind for days. Every time I looked at him, I heard the cold certainty in his voice. Tanya, meanwhile, shifted her tactics. She became overly sweet in front of neighbors who stopped by, always smiling, touching my arm, saying things like, "Marjorie's been a little forgetful, but we're here to help her." To them, it probably sounded like kindness. To me, it was evidence that she was laying the groundwork, spreading doubt about my sanity before I could even defend myself. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. She didn't know I was standing by the door. Her voice was hushed but sharp. "Yes, Mr. Doyle or Mr. Doyle. We'll have the paperwork ready. The sooner we can show she's unfit, the faster we can lock this down. Guardianship will give us everything." She paused, then laughed lightly. "Oh, she won't fight. She's already unraveling." I stepped back before she caught me listening, my pulse pounding in my ears. They were serious. This was not idle talk. They had a lawyer, and they were moving forward. That night at dinner, Ethan brought it up openly. "Mum, Tanya and I scheduled an appointment for you next week with Dr. Foster. He's a specialist, just a checkup to make sure everything's fine." I set my fork down. "I don't need a specialist. I already have a doctor." Tanya's voice was gentle, almost mocking. "But Dr. Foster handles cases like yours. Memory loss, confusion. He can write an evaluation that helps us plan your care." My hands tightened in my lap. "There's nothing wrong with my memory." Ethan leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. "Mum, denying it only makes it worse. We want what's best for you. If you refuse, it looks bad. Cooperating shows you're willing to be responsible." I stared at my plate, fighting the urge to shout. They were using my silence as proof, my resistance as evidence. Every move I made seemed to work against me. Later that night, I sat on the porch with the phone in my hand, scrolling through the recording again. I had them on video, but I knew one recording might not be enough. If they dragged me into court claiming I was delusional, I needed more than one piece of proof. I needed their words in different settings, in their own voices, showing intent. The next morning, I tested my plan. I walked into the kitchen with a notepad and said, "I've been thinking, maybe you're right. Maybe the ranch is too much. If I considered selling, what would it look like?" Their faces lit up almost instantly. Ethan dropped his spoon, grinning. "Finally, Mom. You're being reasonable." Tanya leaned closer, her eyes bright. "It would mean freedom for all of us. You could live stress-free. We'd handle everything. You'd never have to worry about bills again." I nodded slowly, pretending to think. "If it's worth as much as you say, What would we do with the money? Ethan pulled out his phone and scrolled. We already talked numbers. The ranch is worth close to 900,000. After fees and taxes, we'd still walk away with enough to start our real estate company. Reed and Harris Properties. It would change everything for us. He said it with such excitement, as if I wasn't even part of the picture anymore. I kept my face calm and asked, "And what about me?" Tanya smiled thinly. "You'd be fine. We'd put some aside for you. Maybe a small account for your living expenses. That's all you'd need." Her words stung, but I forced myself to stay still, to keep playing the role. Inside, I was memorizing every sentence, every detail. The following days, I let them think they were winning. I let Tanya correct me loudly when I asked a question twice. I let Ethan shake his head when I misplaced my glasses. They were building their case, but I was building mine too. One evening, I deliberately left my phone recording on the counter while we ate. Tanya didn't notice, and Ethan spoke freely. "Once we move her, we can flip this place fast. Buyers are lining up for land like this. We'll be sitting on 500,000 profit within months." Tanya laughed softly. "And she won't even realize what hit her. We'll tell her the market crashed. Old people don't understand numbers anyway." The words burned, but I kept eating, nodding occasionally, as if their cruelty bounced right off me. When they left the table, I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Another piece of proof. Still, the fear was real. At night, alone in my bedroom, I felt the weight of their plan pressing in on me. Guardianship was no empty threat. If they convinced a judge I was incompetent, it wouldn't matter how strong I felt or what I said. My word would be meaningless. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how far they would go. Would they lie under oath? Forge documents? I already knew the answer. They had no boundaries left. The next morning, Tanya cornered me by the sink. "Dr. Foster's appointment is next Thursday. Don't make this hard, Marjorie. If you cooperate, it'll be easier on everyone. If you fight, it'll only prove our point." Her voice was smooth, but her eyes were cold. I held her gaze and said quietly, "You think you're clever, but cleverness doesn't erase the truth." She tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Truth's whatever people believe, and people will believe us." Her words stayed with me long after she walked away. That was their weapon, twisting reality until I questioned my own. Gaslighting wasn't just in their words, it was in their confidence, their certainty that they could make others believe them over me. I stood at the window, watching the fields sway in the wind. The ranch was still mine, but the battle had already begun. If I was going to keep my life, my name, and my sanity, I had to fight smarter than them. I could no longer just react. I had to prepare. And for the first time, I felt something stronger than fear. I felt resolve hardening in my chest. Dinner that night felt like a trap. Ethan sat at the head of the table with his arms crossed, staring at me as if waiting for me to slip. Tanya kept refilling his glass, her smile too wide, her eyes too sharp. The silence was heavy until she finally broke it. "Marjorie, you embarrassed us today," she said, her fork clinking against the plate. I set mine down slowly. "How?" "You asked Mrs. Lee the same question twice at the market, once at the register, and then again in the parking lot. People notice these things. They talk. Do you want the whole town whispering that you've lost your mind?" Ethan leaned in, his voice low but steady. "This is exactly what we mean. You're slipping. You need to accept it." Heat spread across my chest, but I forced my tone calm. "I forgot one thing in a long conversation. That doesn't mean I'm losing my mind." Tanya laughed softly, shaking her head. Denial is part of it. We'll prove it to you, one way or another. I sat there, feeling their eyes on me, the weight of their judgment pressing in. Every bite of food tasted bitter. They weren't just twisting the truth for others anymore. They wanted me to believe it myself. Later, when I retreated to my bedroom, I locked the door and leaned against it, my breath uneven. The gaslighting was constant now, woven into every word, every look. They were turning the smallest mistakes into evidence, rewriting reality until even I questioned it. The next morning, Tanya staged another performance. She left the stove burner on and then called me into the kitchen. "Marjorie, do you smell that? You left the gas on again." I froze. "I didn't touch the stove this morning." She covered her mouth with her hand, pretending to be concerned. "You don't remember? That's worse. Ethan, she doesn't even realize what she's doing anymore." Ethan walked in, frowning as if he had caught me red-handed. "Mom, this is dangerous. You could have burned the house down." My heart pounded as I looked between them. I knew I hadn't done it. I knew she had set me up. But the certainty in their voices made my own memory falter. What if I was wrong? What if my mind really had betrayed me? I turned away before they saw the tears in my eyes. In that moment, I understood their strategy completely. It wasn't enough to take my land. They needed to destroy my confidence, piece by piece, until I surrendered everything willingly. That evening, Ethan confronted me directly. He dropped another stack of papers on the table. "We're done waiting, Mum. You sign these or we move forward with guardianship." I didn't touch the folder. "What if I refuse?" His voice hardened. "Then we'll show the court every mistake you've made. The forgotten names, the misplaced keys, the stove, the gate. We'll prove you're not fit to make decisions anymore. You'll lose everything." Tanya chimed in, her voice sharp. "And no one will believe you. Not the neighbors, not the doctor, not the judge. Everyone already sees the signs." I felt the walls closing in, but I straightened in my chair. "I built this ranch with my own hands. I'm not handing it over because you two decided I'm finished." Ethan's face twisted with anger. "You don't get it, do you? We're not asking. We're telling you. Sign it." The room went quiet. My pulse thudded in my ears, but I didn't move. I couldn't let them see fear. Not now. When they finally stormed out, I sat in the dark, staring at the papers. My hands shook, but my mind was clearer than it had been in days. I knew their game. I knew their lies. And I knew I couldn't play defense any longer. The following day, I started taking notes. Every incident, every cruel remark, every staged mistake. I kept the notebook hidden under the floorboard in my room. I recorded their conversations whenever I could, leaving my phone on the counter, in my pocket, in the laundry room. Each clip was another piece of the puzzle, another weapon for the fight I knew was coming. But their attacks grew bolder too. At breakfast, Tanya said loudly, "Marjorie, you forgot to feed the chickens again." I looked at her calmly. "I fed them at dawn." She shook her head, smiling like a teacher correcting a child. "No, you didn't. Ethan had to do it." Ethan backed her up immediately. "She's right, Mum. You didn't." I clenched my jaw. "I know what I did." Tanya's smile widened. "See, Ethan? She doesn't even realize it." The gaslighting was relentless, but something shifted inside me. Their certainty no longer confused me. It fueled me. With every lie, every insult, they gave me more to use against them. That night, I watched the recordings again. Ethan's voice, Tanya's laughter, the way they plotted when they thought I wasn't listening. I copied the files onto a flash drive and hid it in the barn. If they tried to destroy my phone, the evidence would survive. I went to bed with a single thought repeating in my mind. They thought they were pushing me toward collapse, but they were really pushing me toward war. And when it came, I would not be the one caught off guard. I waited until Ethan and Tanya drove into town before making my move. The ranch was quiet, the only sound the creak of the barn door as I pushed it open. I slipped inside, clutching the flash drive in my pocket. This was the safest place I knew. I had cleared a hollow beneath the old feed bin, lined it with plastic, and tucked the drive inside. If they searched my room or my phone, this piece of evidence would survive. As I covered the spot back with feed sacks, my mind raced. I had enough recordings to show intent, but I needed more. Guardianship wasn't just about land or money, it was about proving I was unfit. If Ethan and Tanya wanted to drag me into court, I had to prepare a case strong enough to counter theirs. That meant witnesses, documents, and above all, timing. That evening, I pretended to be tired earlier than usual. "I'm going to bed," I told them, yawning. Ethan barely looked up from his phone. Tanya gave me a glance that lingered too long, as if measuring whether I truly was as fragile as she wanted the world to believe. I climbed the stairs, but instead of sleeping, I waited. Hours later, I heard them in the kitchen, their voices carried through the vent. "She's resisting harder than I expected," Ethan muttered. Tanya's tone was sharp. "Then we make her look worse. She slips up all the time. We just need to push her until the mistakes pile up. When Dr. Foster sees her, he'll write exactly what we want." My chest tightened, but I kept listening. Ethan sighed. "What if she doesn't sign anything before then?" "She will," Tanya replied coldly. "Fear is stronger than pride. We'll corner her. She'll break." I lay there, heart pounding, letting their words burn into me. They thought I would break. They thought fear would win. But they were giving me exactly what I needed. Their arrogance was feeding my proof. The next day I called my old neighbor, Mrs. Parker, under the pretense of inviting her for tea. She had known me for 40 years, long enough to vouch for my memory and my sanity. When she came over, Tanya hovered, her smile tight, her ears pricked for every word. "Marjorie's been so forgetful lately," Tanya said loudly, handing Mrs. Parker a cup. Mrs. Parker frowned. "That's not what I've seen. She's the same Marjorie I've always known." Tanya's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. That small exchange gave me a spark of hope. If it came to it, I could find people who knew me well enough to see through the lies. That night, Ethan grew more impatient. He placed another set of papers in front of me. "We're done playing games. Sign them, Mum." I looked at him calmly. "What happens if I don't?" He leaned close, his breath hot with anger. "Then I make sure every neighbor, every friend, and every doctor knows you've lost it. You won't be able to buy groceries without people whispering. Do you want to end up locked away, forgotten in some home?" His words cut deep, but instead of answering, I slid the papers back across the table. "No." The silence stretched. Tanya finally broke it with a laugh. "She's more stubborn than we thought, but stubbornness won't save her." They left the room, slamming the door, but I stayed seated, steadying my breath. I had bought myself time. The following morning, I began staging my own act. I let Tanya think I was confused about the grocery list, then corrected myself out loud before she could pounce. I misplaced a spoon, then found it quickly, muttering where I had put it. I wanted her to see cracks, but not the collapse she expected. If she thought I was slipping, she would speak more freely, more arrogantly, and I would catch it all. It worked faster than I expected. 2 days later, while she thought I was napping, Tanya called Doyle again. My recorder was hidden under the couch cushion. Her words came out smooth, practiced. Once the doctor signs off, we'll move fast. The ranch will be in Ethan's name within weeks. She won't even have a chance to fight. I retrieved the recorder later, listening to every syllable, relief washing over me. Another weapon for the case I was building. But the pressure didn't stop. Ethan cornered me in the barn that evening, his voice hard. "We're not waiting forever. If you don't sign by Sunday, I'll take you to court myself." I stared at him, my own son, his face twisted with greed. "Do you hear yourself, Ethan? Do you even realize what you're doing?" He sneered. "I'm doing what you should have done years ago, passing it on. You're just too selfish to admit your time is up." The barn felt colder than the night air as he walked away. I leaned against the wooden beam, my hands trembling. The boy I had raised was gone. In his place was a man who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. Back in the house, Tanya was waiting at the door. "He's right, you know. You're clinging to something that's already slipping away. When the papers are signed, you'll thank us." I looked her in the eye and said softly, "You'll regret underestimating me." She laughed, shaking her head. "No, Marjorie, you'll regret fighting us." That night, I added her words to my notes. Every sentence, every threat, every attempt to break me was fuel. My plan was no longer just about defending myself. It was about turning their cruelty into the very rope they would hang themselves with. Sunday arrived like a storm cloud. Ethan and Tanya had circled that day all week, pressing me with papers, threats, and warnings. By breakfast, Ethan's patience had burned away. He tossed the folder onto the table, his jaw tight. "This is it. No more stalling. Sign, or we move forward without you." I pushed my plate aside. "I told you before, I won't sign." Tanya leaned forward, her tone low and sharp. "Do you really think anyone will believe you over us? We're younger, we're credible, and you're already showing signs. It's over, Marjorie. The only choice you have left is how humiliating this gets for you." I looked at them both, forcing calm into my voice. "If you're so confident, then let me read every word out loud, line by line. We'll sit together, and I'll make sure I understand what I'm signing." Ethan frowned. "Why drag it out? Just sign." I folded my hands on the table. "If you want my signature, you'll give me the respect of explaining what it is first. Unless you're hiding something." They exchanged a glance. Tanya grabbed the papers and started reading the first page, her voice clipped, but halfway through she skipped a section. I stopped her. "You missed a line. Read it again." Her eyes narrowed. "Does it matter? It's legal jargon." I leaned back, keeping my expression neutral. "Then humor me." Her jaw tightened as she read it again, slower this time. My heart raced as I caught the words, transfer of property and irrevocable deed. I repeated them aloud. "So this would take the ranch out of my hands completely, permanently," Ethan snapped. "Yes, that's the point. You can't handle it anymore." For the first time, I let anger rise in my voice. "You want to rob me while I'm alive? You're not getting it." The room exploded into shouting. Ethan slammed his fist on the table. "You don't know what you're doing. You're destroying our future." Tanya hissed. "You've already destroyed enough by clinging to this land like it's a shrine. We deserve a life too." I stood, my chair scraping across the floor. "Then earn it yourself, not by stealing from me." The silence that followed was sharp as glass. Ethan's chest heaved. Tanya's face was red with fury. They had finally dropped the mask completely. That night, I hid my recorder under the couch again. Their voices carried as they argued in the kitchen. "She's not breaking," Ethan muttered. "Then we force it," Tanya snapped. "The doctor's appointment is next. Once Foster writes her down as unfit, she can't fight us in court." "And if she refuses to go?" Tanya's voice was ice. "Then we drag her there. The law will be on our side soon enough." I retrieved the recorder later, my hands trembling. Every word was another nail in their case, but I knew I couldn't wait for them to strike first. It was time for me to set the stage. The next morning, I acted softer, slower, like their gaslighting was working. I let Tanya repeat herself for me, let Ethan shake his head in pity. But when they left for errands, I called Sheriff Collins. "Something's happening here," I told him. My voice was steady, even though my hands shook. "I have recordings, I have proof, but I need to know how to make it matter before they try to lock me away." He listened quietly, then said, "Keep gathering what you can. Don't confront them yet. If what you're saying is true, the law can back you, but timing is everything." I thanked him and hung up, relief and fear mixing inside me. I wasn't alone anymore, but I knew the fight was only beginning. That evening, Ethan tested me again. He held out a pen across the dinner table. "Mum, this is your last chance to do this the easy way, Shah. Don't make us go to court. You'll lose." I stared at the pen, then at him. "If you're so sure I'll lose, why are you so desperate for me to sign now?" His face hardened. "Because once this is signed, it's done. You won't be able to change your mind." Tanya's voice was sharp. "Do it, Marjorie, or the judge will do it for you." I pushed the pen back across the table. "No." Their fury filled the room. Ethan cursed under his breath. Tanya slammed her hand on the table. But I stayed still, calm, steady. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in their eyes, the smallest crack in their confidence. That night, alone in my room, I replayed the recordings again. Their voices, their threats, their arrogance. It was all there. I had more than enough to expose them. But exposure wasn't enough. I wanted them cornered. I wanted them stripped of every weapon they thought they had. I closed my notebook, slid it under the floorboard, and whispered to myself, "If it's war they want, war is what they'll get." The morning of the doctor's appointment came colder than usual, though it was late spring. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee when Ethan walked in, car keys dangling from his hand. "Mum, get ready," he said. "We're leaving in an hour. Dr. Foster's expecting you." Tanya followed, her tone smooth but firm. "Wear something comfortable. It's just a routine evaluation, nothing to be nervous about." I looked at both of them, calm on the outside, though my heart hammered in my chest. I didn't agree to this appointment. Ethan's smile was tight. "It's not optional. If you don't cooperate, it only proves our point." I let the silence stretch before answering. "Fine. Let's see what this doctor has to say." They seemed satisfied, but I wasn't walking into that office empty-handed. In my purse was the recorder, filled with hours of their threats, and a copy of the video that started it all. If Dr. Foster was as complicit as I suspected, I wanted proof of that too. The drive into town was quiet except for Tanya's rehearsed reassurances. "It'll be quick, Marjorie. Answer a few questions, do a memory test, and you're done. No big deal." I stared out the window at the passing fields, my hands gripping the purse in my lap. I knew better. This wasn't about my health. It was about control. At the clinic, Ethan filled out paperwork while Tanya hovered. I signed my name reluctantly, careful not to show how tense I was. When the nurse called me back, Ethan tried to follow, but the nurse stopped him. "Only the patient, please," Tanya protested. "We need to be present. She gets confused." The nurse raised an eyebrow. She seems fine to me. This is a private evaluation. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small surge of power. Alone in the exam room, Dr. Foster entered, clipboard in hand. He was younger than I expected, with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Harris," he began, "your son and daughter-in-law are concerned about your memory. They've noticed forgetfulness, confusion, and unsafe behavior. Tell me, do you often lose track of things?" I met his eyes steadily. "No more than anyone my age. I run a ranch, I pay bills, I cook my own meals. I remember what matters." He nodded, scribbling something. "Do you misplace items?" I leaned forward. "Everyone misplaces items. The question is whether that means I'm unfit to manage my own life. Do you think it does?" He hesitated, caught off guard by my tone. "This is just routine, Mrs. Harris. I ask, you answer." I reached into my purse and set the recorder on the table. "Then let's record everything so there's no confusion later." His eyes flickered. "That's not necessary." "It is," I said firmly. "My son and his wife twist every word I say. I want everything on record." He cleared his throat, uncomfortable now. "Very well. Let's continue." The questions rolled on. Dates, names, simple math. I answered each carefully, clearly refusing to stumble. When he asked me to draw a clock face, I did so without hesitation, labeling every number cleanly. After 20 minutes, he set his pen down. "You performed well, Mrs. Harris. I don't see significant cause for concern at this time." Relief swept over me, but I kept my face steady. "Then you'll write that in your report?" "Yes," he said, though his tone was guarded. "But I also have to note your son's concerns." I leaned in. "Then you should know those concerns are not about my health. They are about my land, and I have proof." His expression tightened, but before he could respond, the nurse knocked and opened the door. "Your family is waiting outside." I slipped the recorder back into my purse. This wasn't over. Back in the lobby, Ethan's eyes searched my face. "How did it go?" I smiled faintly. "Better than you hoped." Tanya narrowed her eyes. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "that Dr. Foster isn't going to hand you what you want on a silver platter." Ethan clenched his jaw. "We'll see." The ride home was tense. No one spoke. Tanya stared out the window, her lips pressed tight, while Ethan gripped the wheel hard enough that his knuckles turned white. That evening, they exploded. "You think you're clever," Ethan spat, slamming the front door shut. "You think one little test changes anything? We'll find another way." Tanya's voice was sharper. "You can't win, Marjorie. Everyone already sees you slipping. It's only a matter of time before the judge rules against you." I stood in the living room, steady as I could manage. "You've underestimated me, and you've underestimated how far I'll go to protect myself." Ethan stepped closer, his face twisted with anger. "You're not strong enough to fight us." I looked him dead in the eye. "Try me." The air between us felt ready to crack. Tanya finally pulled him back, whispering something I couldn't hear. They stormed upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room. I sank into the armchair, shaking from the confrontation. But inside, I knew the tide was shifting. Their desperation was showing. They had counted on the doctor to seal their case, and it hadn't gone the way they planned. But desperation makes people dangerous. I knew they wouldn't stop here. They would push harder, fight dirtier, and I would need to be ready for the next strike. The tension in the house after the doctor's visit thickened like fog. Ethan and Tanya had grown sharper, their patience burned away. They no longer bothered with sweet words or gentle suggestions. Their plan was slipping, and their anger showed in every glance, every clipped word. On Tuesday morning, I found Ethan in the barn, pacing like a caged animal. He turned when he saw me, his eyes dark. "You got lucky with Foster, but one clean test doesn't erase the truth. You're slipping, Mum, and you know it." I stood my ground. "No, Ethan, I'm not slipping. You're just hoping I am." His jaw clenched. "This isn't about hope. It's about reality. You can't keep running this ranch. You can't even keep up with yourself." I didn't argue further. I turned and walked back toward the house, his voice following me. "You'll regret this. You're forcing my hand." Inside, Tanya was waiting with her laptop open. She looked up, her smile cold. "Dr. Foster won't be the only one we talk to. There are other doctors, other lawyers. You can't dodge all of them." I poured myself a glass of water, steadying my voice. "Maybe not, but every attempt you make only shows how desperate you are." Her expression darkened, but she said nothing. That night, I heard them arguing upstairs. Ethan's voice was sharp. "She's stronger than I thought. She's making us look like fools." Tanya snapped back. "Then we tighten the net. If we can't make her sign, we'll make her crack. Fear, pressure, whatever it takes." Their footsteps thundered across the floor as they paced. I lay in bed, listening, every word fueling my resolve. They thought they could wear me down. They thought my age made me fragile. But every threat they hurled only made me steadier. The following day, they tried a new angle. At breakfast, Tanya sat across from me with a folder in hand. "We're setting up a financial review," she said casually, "just to make sure everything's in order. You wouldn't want to miss payments or mishandle accounts, would you?" I looked at her calmly. "All my bills are paid. My accounts are fine." She tilted her head. "For now. But mistakes happen. One wrong move, and you could lose the ranch anyway. Better to let us handle it." Ethan added, "We already spoke to the bank. They're willing to help us streamline things once your name is off the title. This can be clean, Mum. Simple." My chest tightened, but I forced my voice even. "You've spoken to the bank without my consent?" Tanya's smile didn't falter. "We're family. We're looking out for you." I wanted to shout, but instead I nodded slowly, storing the information away. Every reckless move they made added to my arsenal. That afternoon, I drove into town alone, under the pretense of picking up feed. Instead, I stopped by the sheriff's office. I handed Collins the flash drive and my notebook. He flipped through the pages, listening to a clip from the recorder. Ethan's voice filled the office. "Once we move her, we can flip this place fast. Buyers are lining up." Collins leaned back in his chair. "This is serious, Marjorie. You're right to be cautious. But if you want this to stick, you need a clear confrontation, something undeniable." I nodded. "Then I'll give them the chance to expose themselves." When I returned home, Tanya was waiting on the porch. "Took you long enough," she said, arms crossed. "Had errands," I answered simply. She studied me, suspicion in her eyes, but she didn't press further. That evening, Ethan tried once more. He set the papers down in front of me while we sat in the living room. "This is it. You're out of options. Sign, or I'll take you to court by the end of the week." I looked him in the eye. "Take me to court, then." His face reddened, his voice rising. "You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us." My hands trembled, but I held firm. "You haven't done this for me. You've done this for yourselves, and you'll answer for it." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Tanya's scoff. You sound like a child. Threats won't save you. I stood, gathering the dishes from the table. Neither will lies. That night, I replayed the conversation on my recorder. Ethan's anger, Tanya's scorn. It was all there. Clear, undeniable. The house felt like a battlefield now, every room charged with tension. But for the first time, I didn't feel like the one under siege. I had evidence, witnesses, and now the sheriff's ear. I looked out the window at the ranch, the fields swaying in the moonlight. They thought I was cornered. They thought fear would break me. But they were wrong. The storm they had started was about to turn back on them, and I was ready to fight until the very end. The week dragged on like a taut rope ready to snap. Ethan and Tanya no longer pretended to care. Every word from them was a demand, every glance a warning. I knew they were running out of patience, but I also knew that desperation that made them sloppy. On Wednesday evening, Ethan came into the living room holding his phone. He tossed it onto the coffee table, the screen glowing with an email. "Look at this, Mom. A buyer is interested. Cash offer, 950,000. This could all be done in weeks if you'd just cooperate." I stared at the phone without touching it. "That land isn't yours to sell." His face hardened. "It will be, with or without you." Tanya entered, holding a glass of wine, her smile thin. "Do you really want to drag this through court? Think about the gossip. Think about the embarrassment. Everyone will believe us. You'll be remembered as the bitter old woman who lost her mind and fought her own son." I leaned back in the chair, my voice steady. Better that than being remembered as the fool who gave everything away to thieves. The smile slid from her face. Ethan snatched his phone and stormed out. Tanya followed, muttering under her breath. I sat there alone, my heart racing, but I felt the balance shift. Their confidence was cracking. The next morning, I decided it was time to set my own trap. I left my recorder on the counter again, hidden under a dish towel. Then I walked into the kitchen while Tanya was on the phone. She didn't notice me at first. "Yes, Mr. Doyle, we'll have her evaluated again. Once the paperwork goes through, Ethan will hold the deed." "No, she won't resist much longer. She's already unraveling." I stepped closer, and she finally looked up. Her expression froze for a second. Then she quickly ended the call. "Marjorie, you shouldn't sneak up on people." I folded my arms. "And you shouldn't make promises you can't keep." Her eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. That afternoon, I drove into town again under the pretense of buying supplies. I met Sheriff Collins in his office, slid the new recording across the desk, and told him what I had overheard. He listened, shaking his head slowly. "You've got enough to show intent," he said. "But if you want to end this clean, you'll need a confrontation where they expose themselves fully. Something public or undeniable." I nodded. "Then I'll make it happen." When I returned home, Ethan and Tanya were waiting. Ethan blocked the doorway, his arms crossed. "Where were you?" I held up a bag of groceries. "Town. Feed store was out of stock, so I had to wait." Tanya eyed me suspiciously. "You're lying. You've been scheming." I walked past them without answering. The anger in their silence told me they felt control slipping through their fingers. That night, I overheard them again upstairs. Ethan's voice was sharp. "We need to push her harder. If she won't sign, then we make her look completely incompetent. Stage something she can't deny." Tanya replied, "Like what?" "Leave the water running. Burn food. Forget to lock a door. We'll make it look like she can't live alone." I closed my eyes, listening, fury mixing with fear. They weren't waiting for me to fail anymore. They were planning to create failures. The next morning I acted normal, cooking breakfast and feeding the chickens. But inside, I braced myself. If they wanted to play dirty, I had to be ready. Sure enough, by midday, Tanya shouted from the kitchen, "Marjorie, you left the faucet running again." I walked in calmly. The sink was overflowing, water dripping onto the floor. But I had been outside for the past half hour, tending to the animals. I looked at her evenly. "No, I didn't." She forced a concerned look. "You don't even remember turning it on, do you?" I pulled out my phone from my apron pocket and pressed play. The recording from last night filled the room. Ethan's voice, clear as day. "Leave the water running. Burn food. Forget to lock a door. We'll make it look like she can't live alone." Tanya froze, her face draining of color. Ethan entered just then, holding a stack of mail. He stopped when he heard his own voice on the recorder. His face twisted in shock, then rage. "What the hell is this?" I held the phone steady, my hand surprisingly calm. "Proof. Every word, every plan, every lie. You've dug your own grave." The silence that followed was electric. Tanya's hand trembled as she set down the dish towel. Ethan's fists clenched, but he didn't move closer. For the first time, they knew the balance had shifted. I turned off the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. "Try to push me again, and this goes to every neighbor, every lawyer, every judge. Do you understand?" Neither of them answered. Their silence was louder than any words. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I knew the battle wasn't over. They would lash out again, maybe harder, maybe smarter. But the moment they heard their own voices thrown back at them, something broke. For the first time, they realized I wasn't just surviving their war. I was fighting it. The house had fallen silent after I played the recording. Ethan and Tanya no longer taunted me at the table or filled the air with threats. Their voices, once so loud, now sounded smaller whenever they spoke. But I knew the end had to be more than silence. There had to be resolution, not just survival. 2 days later, Sheriff Collins came by. He sat at my kitchen table, hat resting on the wood, while I handed him the flash drive and my notes. He listened carefully, then gave a slow nod. "You've done more than most would. If they push you again, you've got enough to stop them in their tracks." I looked down at my hands. "I don't just want to stop them. I want them to see what they've become." Collins studied me for a moment. "Sometimes the law is enough. Sometimes the heart has to do the rest." That night, I asked Ethan and Tanya to sit with me in the living room. They came reluctantly, suspicion in their eyes. I placed the recorder on the coffee table between us. "You've heard your own words," I began. "You know what you've done. If I take this further, the sheriff will act. But I don't want to destroy you. I want you to understand what this has cost." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't ruin your own family like that." I met his eyes. "Family is what you almost ruined. For land, for money, for power you didn't need. You wanted to strip me of my dignity, my voice, my name. Do you understand what that does to a mother?" Tanya crossed her arms, her voice sharp but shaky. "We just wanted a chance at a better life." I leaned forward. "Then work for it. Build it yourselves, not by tearing down the person who raised you." The room went quiet. Ethan's shoulders slumped, his anger draining away. His voice was low when he finally spoke. "We were wrong." Tanya looked at him in shock, but he didn't glance her way. He kept his eyes on me. "We let greed twist everything. I can't take back what we said or did, but I don't want to fight anymore." My chest tightened. For weeks I had dreamed of this moment, but hearing it still hurt. I nodded slowly. I'll hold you to that. No more papers. No more schemes. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built on respect, not control. Tanya's face softened, though her pride kept her voice small. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll try. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That's all I ask. From that day forward, things shifted. Ethan still carried his pride, but the threats ended. Tanya stopped her whispers and her staged accidents. There were awkward silences at meals, long stretches where none of us knew how to fill the space. But slowly, little by little, the house grew less heavy. I knew trust would not come back overnight. Wounds like these left scars. But I also knew that forgiveness had to be offered if we wanted any hope of healing. I didn't forgive to excuse what they had done. I forgave so the poison wouldn't stay lodged in my own heart. The ranch was still mine. My name was still on every deed, every bill, every fence post. But now it wasn't just about holding on. It was about proving that dignity and justice could stand even when betrayal tried to tear them apart. On the porch one evening, Ethan stood beside me, watching the sun sink over the fields. He didn't say much, but after a long silence he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mum." It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was enough to start. If you've stayed with me until the end of this story, thank you. Family betrayal and forgiveness are never easy to talk about, but they're real for many people. What do you think matters more? Protecting your dignity at all costs, or giving forgiveness even when it feels undeserved? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, please like and subscribe to my channel so I can keep sharing more stories with you. Your support means more than you know.